Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood. I'm here to continue my read-along review of Benight and Beguile, written by John Philip Betancourt. Chapter 2, Don't Let It Escape. Evie carefully clasped a golden necklace around her neck. She stared at herself in the mirror and wondered what would become of her as soon as she stepped foot off of the dock Ibera. The light from the dim lamp next to her made the little crucifix on the necklace sparkle. She took a breath and placed the necklace under her white blouse and puffy shoulders and cuffs that was pristinely tucked into the top of her long gray tweed skirt. Almost said tweeted. That would not have been good. The young English woman, ready for her new adventure on the island of Welshport, placed a tweed jacket that matched her skirt over her shoulders as her cabin maid Catherine opened her room door. The bellhop was just here, he said. Your things have already been taken off the ship. There's someone already awaiting you below. Oh, thank you. Am I the only one getting off here? Evie asked. Catherine furrowed her brow. It dawned on her that Evie truly had no idea where she was and just how desolate and remote this area of America was. No one was disembarking with Evie. No one. It was even a shock most, if not all, of the other passengers as to why anyone would even come here and why the White Star Line Company had even decided to make this specific spot an official stop. But Lord Family Money talked. Evie was about to marry into made it clear to White Star that no amount of money was an issue. They would prefer Evie dock directly on the island. 20,000 made it happen, and Evie got a personalized docking. Just you, Catherine said, smiling nervously for her new friend. It was so nice meeting you on this trip, Miss Ruth. I wish you a wonderful rest of your trip, Evie said, her cobalt blue eyes sparkling in the glow of the orange lamplight. As she set for the door of their shared cabin, she slipped on one white glove, but Catherine grabbed her free bare hand and pulled her back toward her. Her facial expression showed worry. Evie thought something had suddenly happened to her, that perhaps the older woman was sick all of a sudden, but it was only anxiety and worry all over her face. Darling, please be careful. Stay alert in all you do, and in all your acquaintances here in Welshport. Frankly, I don't want to open my morning paper when I'm back in New York and read that something else has happened up here in this forgotten little island, and your name be listed as yet another of the strange occurrences. What Evie replied, surprised at the bizarre request. I'll be fine, she added. I'll pray so, Miss Ruth. I think that maybe you've been misled. Maybe whatever happened here is just a rumor of some kind of story that people misunderstood. You know how gossip travels, Evie replied, as the bellhop knocked on the door. Miss, they're waiting for you, he said in his charming Irish accent. Thank you, Evie said, turning back to Catherine and pulling her arm back slowly that was still okay, was still locked in Catherine's worried gasp. I'll be fine, she whispered back. Catherine smirked and shook her head, as if to shake out all the horrible thoughts she had. Of course you will. I'm being ridiculous. Of course. Of course. You go on and go have a wonderful life, my darling. As soon as I get back to New York, I'll send you a beautiful wedding gift. Please go and be happy. Feeling as if she was leaving a family member, another mother of sorts. Sorry, give me a second. Evie lunged for Catherine Randall Ruth and gave her a big, tight hug. Over the course of their travels, they had not become extremely close, but close enough for Evie to feel a twinge of sadness at leaving her old friend aboard Iberia. Catherine was quite literally the only person she had time to connect while on the journey. The two women released themselves, and Evie was gone like a flash, like a puff of smoke, like a ghostly apparition, suddenly dissipating into a wall of darkness. She was othered to the lower decks of the ship, where a long line of first-class maids and butlers were lined up to see her off. In truth, they had all known who she was, the new bride of Sebastian Lord, the probable mystery prince of Welshport Island. The whispers and husband gossip had not held itself in the walls of Catherine and Evie's shared room. It had spread, and they were all there to witness the young woman off to a place no one else dared to enter. Goodbye, miss, the bellhop who escorted her said, helping her up into a large ramp that led off the ship and down to a waiting silver and chrome car awaiting Evie at the bottom. Evie took his hand and lifted herself onto the ramp and looked back. The maids curtsied and the butlers lowered their heads. Evie smirked and slowly walked down the ramp. She felt as if she were walking the plank of a pirate ship, destined to fall into the cold, icy waters of the Atlantic, a cold, watery grave for her English life, for birthing into the American life. As she slowly made her way down the long ramp to the waiting car, she could see the village of Welshport sparkling below in the gauzy dusk evening of the island mist. It was adorable. She thought of how sweet the village seemed, with its small little shops and its adorable cafes. She could see the townspeople walking about hand in hand, arm in arm, enjoying the ocean air. The closer she got to the car and the edge of the village, the more adoring it got. Cobblestone streets and gas lamps made up the small square, like it had been recreated just for her to mimic the small 7 square mile neighborhood in London that Evie had called home. Then, from the back street of the chauffeur-driven chrome car, popped women with tight, curly hair pulled up in a beautiful bun. She was dressed almost exactly like Evie, a tweed skirt and white long-sleeve blouse that had tiny lace ruffles around her waist. Her deep brown eyes sparkled in the last gasp of sunlight that was creeping over the hills behind the ship from mainland Maine. Give her mocha-colored skin a glow of bronze that Evie was entranced by. Miss Jordan, hello. Welcome. I'm Celeste Devaney. I work for the Lord family and have been tasked as your personal lady-in-waiting. I'm very happy to bring you to your new home. How was your trip? The beautiful Celeste said, her gorgeous foreign accent filling Evie's ears like a song. Thank you, Celeste. I was not expecting someone to come with the car. Evie replied as the driver opened the car door for her and Celeste. But of course, the Lords are very eager to have you and welcoming you into their family. They wanted to be sure everything was perfect for your arrival, Celeste said. So far, it has been. The trip was long, but I was able to rest some, Evie replied. That is good to hear. The family is sure you will need more time to rest, so your belongings have already been taken by another car ahead of you back to the estate, so that when you arrive, you'll have nothing to do but enjoy your new home, Celeste replied, sounding like a concierge to a fancy hotel. You work for the family then? Evie asked as the driver cleared his throat, signaling he was still holding the door open for the women. Celeste smirked and said, Yes, I am to be your lady in waiting, but not in the typical sense. I have my own life. This is my profession. The lords have asked me to be more of a guide for you as you get used to your surroundings. Help you with your clothes, your personal affections, anything you need. I will be there to help facilitate getting, or sorry, facilitate, getting it. But it's not like the old days, if that makes sense. I've known the Lord family for a very, very long time. And this is a job that they provided for me over the years. I used to work for Mr. Lord Sebastian's mother. But Celeste replied, stopping short of finishing her sentence. That's understatement, another woman's voice said from beyond the car. Celeste turned to see a light-haired woman holding a basket of goods just purchased at a corner store, lifting an eyebrow at the whole welcome of Evie's. It was Mary Good, and Celeste knew her very well too. Mary, Celeste replied, placing herself between Evie and Mary, like a stone figure, blocking any negative energy coming from Mary's eyes. So you're Sebastian's young bride, huh? Welcome, dear. The whole town's been waiting for you. The whole town. You're like the first fresh bloom after a bitter winter frost. To this place, your arrival has been so eagerly awaited, Mary said with a passive aggressive curtsy. Evie smiled, unable to note Mary's obvious snide tone, and stepped around Celeste, who reached for Evie's hand to pull her back, but missed. Are you friends with Sebastian? Evie asked. Evie Jordan, she added, extending her hand to shake Mary's. Friends, Mary said, squinting her eyes, expecting Celeste to correct her connection to Sebastian, but when Celeste said nothing, Mary surprisingly said, Yes, friends. Well then, I hope to see you at our wedding, Eve said naively. Celeste gasped. Her body leaped towards the two women as Mary giggled at Eve's seemingly girl-like innocence at truly not knowing who Mary really was. It was Evie's first test in a world that felt so strange to her the second she stepped foot on Welshport. The ship behind them blared its deep, deep foghorn as it set off for New York City, a clear sign that they had been on the dock much too long. We should go, Miss Jordan. The family is waiting, Celeste said, quickly pulling Evie away from Mary and tucking her away in the car with its white leather seats and chrome window frames and neck. essence. Still outside the car, Celeste snarled at Mary, who only stood on the cobblestone streets with her groceries, as she giggled to herself at Celeste's scrambling to get Evie away as fast as she could. See you, Mary, mouthed to Celeste, who only rolled her eyes and finally got into the car herself. Miss Jordan, you should really be more careful at who you invite to the wedding, Celeste said. Once they were in the privacy of the moving car. Did I do something wrong? I thought she said she was friends with Sebastian, Evie asked. She is not a friend at all. Evie turned to Celeste, confused. Well, then who is she? Celeste turned her head to look out of the small car window as Mary's body was getting smaller and smaller in the distance, and further away they drove. Mary waved at the car in a teasing manner, as she knew the whole interaction would have set Celeste into a tailspin of having to figure out how to explain who she really was. Well, Evie asked, still waiting for Celeste to respond. Miss Jordan, I will show you who your friends are. I will show you the ways of Welshport. It's important that you trust in me. Give me all the trust you have, because this place is not as forgiving as it looks. Stay away from Mary Good, Celeste explained. Evie's heart sank a bit into her chest. She suddenly felt as if she were being reprimanded by her mother of some school married, like she'd erred, and now her new family would hear of her stupidity inviting someone they're perhaps not want to the wedding. Will she come to the wedding? I feel awful. I didn't know, Evie said. She won't. She knows better. Just forget this happened. Forget you met her. Forget her, Celeste said, grabbing Evie's hand and squeezing. Evie smiled. She had no choice but to trust her new friend Celeste. And in her nervous heart, she felt that indeed Celeste had her best interest, and that if she were to make a good impression on her new friend, Celeste would be her guide into the good place. And slowly, as the car continued its way through the winding and curling small cobblestone covered streets of Welshport village, Evie began to feel better. On a large plot of land deep inside the Kirmore Forest, the Lord family had their home. It was a large mansion built of limestone and marble, built over several generations of family members. They used their money, power, and prestige to hold court as the island's unofficial royal family. The Gothic style mansion had two large towers on either side that stood over the millions of trees like the lookouts of a ship's crows. The Lord's family home was okay, yeah, let's go on. Okay. Was secluded within the forest by design. The family enjoyed a bit of mystery and most of all their privacy. Anyone entering the land had to travel a 3 mile long winding road up the main house, and as the visitors arrived, they were greeted with a home of 4 stories and large glass windows that glistened with the lights from the first floor parlors, and drawing rooms that were covered by soft colored wallpapers and nectar themed paintings. Uh, Inside the main drawing room was a wish of nerves and anxiety awaiting the new family member, Sebastian Lord. Evie's soon to be husband stood staring intensely into the roaring fireplace and kept them all warm from the chill of Maine's Frenchman Bay wind. His grandmother, Rebecca, sat on the cushioned table love seat in her black dress, carefully doing her needle point of a large black crown as the orange glow of the night fire bathed her white hair in the light like a personalized sunset. Rebecca's youngest son and Sebastian's uncle, Jacob, flipped through the newspaper of the day that he has already read twice. His dark, handsome features matched those of his even more handsome nephew Sebastian. The two not only looked alike, but they were dressed alike too. Dark suits and white cotton shirts. They came together in a handsome Windsor knot tie. Jacob quickly licked his fingers to turn the news page, while his own daughter, 8-year-old Charlotte, played with a doll on the large oriental carpet, dressed in her best little white frilly dress, ready to meet Sebastian's bride. She's late, Jacob murmured as Sebastian rolled his eyes. Uncle Jacob, I would have thought raising a little girl as rambunctious as little Charlotte you would have had built up a bit more tolerance and patience. Eh, Evie's belongings are already here. She'll be along soon, Sebastian replied to his Uncle Jacob, who he always felt was trying to antagonize him. You seem very calm just before meeting her, Jacob replied, as not once looking up from his paper. It's almost as if you're ready to now, if you already know you love her. He added, clearly jealous of his nephew's handsome looks and closeness to Rebecca as a grandson than Jacob was as her son. Should I be nervous? The bridegroom asked. Jacob smirked and finally did fold up the newspaper and stood up. He adjusted the soft fabric of his vest, slipping it back down to its correct place around his torso. You haven't seen Evie since you were 11 years old. What if she's not what you expect? What if she's some kind of English gargoyle with jagged teeth and a mole on her face? The size of the whole island of Welshport, Jacob said, teasing his nephew. Stop it, Jacob, the matriarch said, looking up from her needlepoint of the black crow. When Evangeline arrives, I want nothing but the utmost respect to her. She'll be exhausted from her trip. I want her to feel at home the minute she walks through the door. I'm just stating the obvious as the clear heir to the family's mass fortune. It's a bit presumed. Then we trust the next generation to this girl we don't even know, Jacob said. What are you saying? Sebastian asked defensively. I'm saying that perhaps we've all been a bit too hasty on welcoming in a new member of this family without properly vesting her, Jacob said, shocking Sebastian. Oh, this is ridiculous, Sebastian shouted. You're constantly talking about money, always worried about money and who it's going to. I've never even thought about any of grandmother and grandfather's publishing companies. You just keep, Sebastian said, getting interrupted. Enough, Rebecca shouted. I won't have this energy in this room any minute more. That's enough. But now both of you straighten your behaviors and act accordingly, Rebecca said, trying to their minds off the vast publishing empire the Lord family has acquired and that Jacob was so obsessed with. Both men bowed their heads respectfully, bowed their head respectfully, agreeing to Rebecca's request. Rebecca continued to knit as Sebastian walked over and sat next to his grandmother. On the lumpy olive green sofa, she dropped her knitting needles and gazed at him through loving eyes. She adored him and wanted only what was best for him. But the spirit she knew always had other plans. Rebecca saw her mission as to thwart the fates and keep her family in the directions her husband and his father before him had created. You must be good to her. Do you understand? Rebecca asked of her grandson as Jacob rolled his eyes from his cor- corner of the room. Good to her, Charlotte shouted. Of course, grandmother. I want her to be happy here, Sebastian replied. Rebecca smiled and took a deep breath as if she was bracing herself for a tidal wave of emotional days to come. Come, Charlotte, Rebecca said, lifting her old frame from the sofa. Let's wash up before our new guest arrives, Rebecca added, reaching her hand out for little Charlotte to grab on to. Who? Charlotte asked. Your new cousin. She'll be here any minute, and we must look out our best, Rebecca replied. Rebecca's flowing black dress almost engulfed the entire floor of the drawing room. Charlotte got up from the floor and reached for her grandmother's bony hand. As she did, as she, sorry, as she did, she reached too far, and her pinky finger was pricked by the needle sticking out from the work Rebecca was doing. A drop of blood fell from Charlotte's hand and hit the carpet. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but she only made a small squeal. Rebecca kneeled down and pinched the tiny wound on her pinky, alleviating the pain and holding the blood in. The force of life, don't let it escape, child, the Lord Family Matrix said of the tiny drips of blood coming from the girl. Mumsers, a pale-skinned English maid named Georgina, said, entering the dim room of shadow flickering fire-lit. Miss Jordan is on her way up. Her car is making its way up the drive now. The family looked at each other. Butterflies filled Sebastian's stomach. He felt the coolness of nerves swirl into his body like an ice-cold, salty sea wave crashing on the naked skin. Ready or not, Jacob said again to his soon-to-be married nephew as Rebecca turned to them both and lifted a disappointing eyebrow as the family slowly made their way to the main foyer to welcome Evie. As the Jacob passed his mother, Rebecca, he took hold of Charlotte's hand and, along with Sebastian, the three went to the foyer. Rebecca lagged behind. As she did so, she pulled the tarot card of the Red River out inside a small pocket, swung into the bodies of her large black dress. She looked at the cold frame of the paper and the large red river painted in the center of the card, symbolizing like the blood from Charlotte's finger, the life force. But the card showed that there was an end of the river. It flowed into a patch of painted green trees and came to an end, thus symbolizing the end of something, the end of life, the end of life force, death. She took a deep breath, realizing that this card of the slowing, dying Red River was a dangerous and frightening omen in her tarot card reading from earlier the evening, with Gaspar having it pulled just in time for Evie's arrival, too, made Rebecca's stomach filled with butterflies, but not for the same reason as Sebastian. Hers were butterflies, whose wingers were poison and lethal. She knew something horrible must be coming. The tarot cards told her so. Amy looked out of the fogged up glass of the Lord's car. She could see the giant lawn leading up to a massive estate of stone that was cloaked in a thick of large forest trees. It was like a wonderland southern in sea fog and overcast skies. It's impressive, isn't it? Celeste says of the Lord estate. This is Terramore House. They named it after the Terramore forest that surrounds it. All of the wood that built this house, as much of the town, came from the tiny forest. This tiny forest, it miraculously came back thicker and more majestic than before. Celeste further explained. It's beautiful. The house, the island, the forest, all of it, Evie marveled. As the car slowly made its long way up to the mansion, the family finally exhaled to a cold gust of wind that blew through the many trees. It was a breeze that swirled the branches so much that it was hard to tell what the sound was. The crashing waves of the sea around them, or the trees singing in the wind. With the fog lifted slightly, the three maids and the two butlers stood in a straight line. Okay. Stood in a straight line outside, ready to greet the young new mistress. The car pulled up to the family, all standing on the top steps near the front door. The wind blew again, and Evie and Celeste stepped out. Celeste grabbed hold of Evie's arm and past the maids, who all curtsied, and the butlers bowed their heads in a quick nod. Miss Lord, Evie said to Rebecca. Mr. Lord, she added to both Jacob and Sebastian. I present to you Miss Evangeline Jordan. Evie smiled politely and stepped forward to Rebecca's extended hand, just as Charlotte released her grasp from Jacob and rushed up to Evie. The little Lord Heiress pulled at Evie's wrist and lowered her head in a quick motion, then bit Evie on her pinky, breaking skin. Evie screamed in pain as Celeste pulled Charlotte away, and Evie closed and helped her quickly wrap the wound with a pure white handkerchief. Charlotte, Sebastian shouted, pulling the girl further back away from Evie. My God, child, Jacob replied in horror, pulling her back. Then, with her lips stained with crimson smears of Evie's blood, Charlotte tilted her and smiled. She looked deep into the horrified eyes of Evie Jordan, with a bewildering look on her face, as if she herself didn't know why she had done this. Then, for an unknown reasons, she repeated what her grandmother had just told her. The force of life, don't let it escape. So the kid bit her. I remember when my daughter first bit me, and it was just yeah, accident. It wasn't deliberate. Kid, kids will be kids. Um, I really find it interesting that Evie bonds with this girl who she doesn't know on her trip, but she's known her this whole trip, so she feels close to her. So here's this woman who's rich, and she gives her this hug goodbye. And there is this bit of nervousness with Evie. And here Evie meets Celeste, who's basically, might as well say basically her guide, her. I don't want to say Jiminy Cricket because it's too soon to say that. I don't think Celeste is quite Evie's, conscience. I think Evie has her own conscience and her own mind. But Celeste is sort of like her advisor too, where she's telling her, "This is who you talk to. This is who you don't," because this woman, Celeste is like, "Son of a bitch." Yeah, I wonder if I'd give Celeste a pistol. What she'd do? Yeah, she'd probably shoot that bitch. But like no hesitation, cap her right in the head. No one will miss that girl. Um, I'm just listen. And then they get in the car, and Evie's feeling bad for about it, about like inviting this woman to the wedding. But Celeste is like, no, she ain't gonna show. She knows better. But I love that, Jacob, who we learned a little bit about in the previous chapter, had his daughter is, you know, he treats his daughter sort of like a second class citizen. I've talked about how women were often treated like second rate citizens, but here's this little girl who's sort of getting that treatment too from her own dad, who's a bit of a dick. Um, Seemingly, I'll say. And Sebastian, he seems pretty laid back, but he just doesn't, he cannot stand his uncle like, at all. He doesn't seem like he can stand him. So far, I'm really enjoying this. I like the scene setting is really nice. I like how the town is very small, but people are very polite. It When you live in a small town, things do get around quickly, word of mouth. So if you hear something or you think someone thinks they know something, they would spread it. So and that's something what you know with Welshport, someone might know something that maybe Evie, who's new to Welshport, might. Oh, that's not true, but it turns out it could be true, and that is something I could see happening. But so far, I really am enjoying this story. Um, so that was chapter 2 of Benight and Beguile. Link to chapter 2 will be in the description box. I hope you guys check it out. I will see you guys tomorrow.